You heard, I'm sure, of trickle-down economics, right? It started with Arthur Laffer, rest in peace, an economist during the Reagan times. What is trickle-down economics? Trickle-down economics is the top 1%, 5% do very well. They make the most amount of money. They spend the most amount of money. They pay the most amount of taxes. They create businesses, hire people to work for them. That's trickle-down economics. Has that been the case, though? If you ask many of the average Americans, middle class Americans, no, that has not been the case. So what has happened is that the top keeps getting richer, and the wealth divide, the wealth gap between the haves and have-nots is getting wider and wider. That's why I put videos out. I say, listen, you need to invest. These people, when I say these people, I'm not in the top 1%. I'm not probably even in the top 5%. But what I'm saying is that I do well because I figured the game out. The game is you need to invest. You need to invest for your future. Nobody's going to give you anything for free. Nobody is going to give you that. And the problem with it is there's not enough education that's going around from literally elementary school level all the way to college. We create a spender society, right? We used to be a manufacturing society. Now we are a spender society, right? And 75% of the economy is consumer spending. Most of it done on credit cards. I'll talk about that on Friday, what's happening with these buy now, pay later loans. Look, you need to see the picture. The picture is clear. The picture is you need to invest. You need to take care of yourself. The government's not going to take care of you. The rich people are not going to take care of you. You need to do it yourself. The trickle down does not work. Look, I'm a capitalist, full on, but the trickle down does not work. The rich get richer, and all power to them. By the way, the rich get richer. I'm not against it. I'm a capitalist. But do they go open businesses, or do they hoard, or do they go invest in other things, hard assets, because they have figured out the game as well. I have a good friend of mine who I talk to quite often. He said something to me 6 months ago that I go like, yeah, this makes so much sense. What did he say? He said, don't slave harder, save in hard assets. That's the playbook. You got to save in hard assets. Look at all these asset classes, right, that the rich people are in and the top 1% in. And the wealth gap keeps getting larger and larger. And literally, the top 5%, top 10% is carrying the economy because consumer spending that's happening on the lower end is happening on credit cards and people are struggling. But on the top end, they have the cash. They plop it down. They buy real estate. They buy gold. They do all kinds of things. One thing they're not doing is, opening businesses and hiring people. Look at the unemployment levels in this country. Look at the unemployment level in the college graduates over the last 10 years. Extremely high. Why? Well, AI is coming. It's replacing every job. If you went to a 4-year college and got some useless degree, what good is that? Nobody good. So there's the first topic. What I'm talking about here, the economy is heavily reliant on wealthy individuals. No question about it. But is it trickling down? Since Q4 2019, personal spending has risen 50%, 50% in the top 20% of U.S. households. I can attest to that. Meanwhile, the middle class and bottom 40% consumer expenditures have increased by just 25%, half the pace of the top 20%, and most of it done by credit, okay? And we know what's happening with credit cards. I'm going to talk about that on Friday as well. The credit card defaults are going through the roof. Auto loan defaults are going through the roof, specifically on the subprime end. By comparison, prices have increased 24% on average during the same period. So the prices are increasing over the past 5 years to the tune of 24%. 24 divided by 5 is about 5%. What happened to the government's 2.5%? Gaslighting. Nothing. In other words, the bottom 80% of households are barely keeping up with inflation in their spending growth. 100%. How many of you are earning 25% more than you did 5 years ago? That's just to keep up with inflation. Nothing more, nothing less. Have your W-2 paychecks gone up by 25%? No. Overall, the top 10% of earners now drive 50% of the consumer spending. Let me read that again. Overall, the top 10% of earners now drive 50% of consumer spending. And as I said, 75% of our GDP, gross domestic product, is consumer spending. up from 36% 3 decades ago, according to Moody's. Overall, the top 10% earners drive the expenditures. And here's the chart. Look at the gap. Look at the difference. Do you see the gap here? Right? Okay, well, the wealth gap is widening. The wealth gap is widening because the rich know what to do with their money. The rich don't put their money in a CD or a savings account. The rich go invest. And with that money, they borrow money. And with the borrowed money, they invest some more. They accumulate assets. That's what you guys need to do. You guys need to know or learn. And it doesn't take that much money, right? And control your expenditures. Control your frivolous, expenditures. That includes going to Starbucks every morning, on your way to work, spending $7-8 on a cup of coffee. Save that money, invest that money, dollar cost average with that money, buy Bitcoin with that money, buy gold with that money, because you can do all these things in small increments. You don't need millions and billions of dollars to do this, right? So my advice is don't slave harder. Save in our hard assets. Look out for your financial future. Create a financially free future from banks and credit cards. And again, that is not bad. But all I'm saying is you guys need to do this yourself. Nobody is going to take care of it. One of the reasons I created a channel was because of this. I've known this for quite a while. I'm fine. I'm 57. I'm fine. I'm taken care of. I don't care what happens. Of course, I care about my kids, about what they're going to do in the future. But hopefully, I'm teaching them the right things. Spread the message. Talk to your children. Talk to your friends. Talk to your relatives. At dinner, we shouldn't be all flipping TikTok. We should be talking about these things. How rich are getting richer. Again, I'm not against it. I'm all for it. But the trickle down has failed. It did not work. What works is that duplicate what they're doing in a much smaller case. That's all I'm asking, because that's going to be, the way you get to financial freedom for yourself. A lot of people say, what is financial freedom? Financial freedom is not counting pennies at the end of the month because your paycheck is not enough or it's not keeping up with inflation. That's a start. Then accumulation of assets. That's where it needs to be, because those assets, with the printing of the money, keep growing. They, real estate, Bitcoin, gold, stocks, they keep growing. And you're going to say, well, Sergio, everything is so high. Well, you could have said that 6 months ago. You could have said that a year ago. You could have said that 2 years ago. Everything is so high. Well, they're higher yet, aren't they? So all I'm saying is just duplicate what the rich are doing. Close that wealth gap. And that wealth gap closure is going to happen by information and correct education. So